They said the sea never lies. They said if you listen closely at dawn, you can hear the ocean whisper the names of those it will claim. On that morning, the ocean was not whispering. It was screaming. Oluchi had never heard such a sound in her 16 years. She was used to the gentle hum of waves against the wooden canoes, the clinking of fishermen's paddles, the distant cries of gulls searching for scraps. But this was different. This was sharp, urgent, almost human. It came again, a high, trembling wail carried on the cold dawn breeze. She froze on the narrow path that led to the shore, her bare feet sinking into the cool, damp earth. Every instinct in her told her to turn back. In her village, everyone knew better than to answer strange calls before the sun fully rose. Spirits wandered at that hour. Spirits with promises sweeter than palm wine and prices sharper than broken glass. But the sound, it was too desperate, too full of pain. And so against every warning her late mother had whispered into her ears as a child, Oluchi stepped onto the shore. What she saw made her drop the pot. Half in the water, half on the wet sand, tangled in a giant fishing net, was a woman. Or at least she looked like one, but from the waist down, shimmering blue-green scales caught the early light like molten glass, and her belly, swollen, heavy, pregnant. The woman's eyes locked on Oluchi's. They were the color of deep ocean water, and with a voice that seemed to echo both in the air and in Oluchi's bones, she gasped, "Save me, and I will give you more than you have ever dreamed." But the girl's grandmother used to say, "When the sea offers you a gift, remember, it will ask for something greater in return." Welcome to African Tales by Emma. Please like, share, and subscribe. Oluchi's story had never been one people liked to tell. She was born on a night when lightning danced across the sky without rain, and by morning, her mother was dead. Her father, a fisherman, vanished into the sea 2 years later and never returned. The village elders had tried to place her with distant relatives, but no one wanted the burden of a child who came with the kind of bad luck people whispered about in the market. In the end, her father's younger sister, Aunt Ngozi, took her in. Not out of love, but because she needed someone to fetch water, sweep floors, and carry firewood. Life in Aunt Ngozi's compound was a daily test of endurance. Her chores began before the first cock crowed and ended long after the moon had climbed into the sky. The only reward she got was a small plate of watery yam porridge and a mat in the corner of the goat shed. Still, Oluchi learned how to survive, keep her head down, stay out of the way, and listen more than she spoke. But she had never learned how to ignore the pull of the sea. Every morning she made the trip to fetch water alone, and every morning she felt as though something under those waves was watching her. This morning, though, was different. The air smelled sharper, tinged with salt and something faintly metallic, like blood. The crying she'd heard still rang in her ears. She stepped closer to the water's edge. The net was old but strong. Its thick ropes wound tightly around the mermaid's arms and tail. The more the creature struggled, the more the coarse fibers bit into her skin. Her scales glistened with droplets that caught the dawn light, turning the sand beneath her into a mirror of colors. Oluchi's breath caught. She had heard stories of Mami Wata, the river and sea spirits who could make a person rich beyond imagination or curse them into madness. But she had never imagined seeing one herself, let alone one in distress. "Please," the mermaid whispered again, her voice breaking. "They will come back, the fishermen. And if they find me, I will die." Oluchi's hands trembled. If anyone saw her here helping a creature like this, they might believe she was a witch. But if she walked away, she would hear that desperate voice in her dreams forever. She stepped into the cold water. The net was heavier than it looked. It reeked of seaweed and rotting fish, and every knot seemed to fight against her fingers. The waves pushed and pulled at her legs, soaking the hem of her dress and chilling her to the bone. The mermaid winced every time Oluchi tugged at the ropes. "Hurry!" she urged, her eyes darting toward the horizon. Oluchi glanced in the same direction and froze. Far off, small specks bobbed on the water, the fishermen's canoes. They would be here in minutes. Her heart pounded as she worked faster, ignoring the way the coarse rope scraped her skin. She finally loosened the last knot, and the mermaid slumped forward, breathing hard. "Thank you," she said, her lips curling into the faintest smile. And then, before Oluchi could speak, the mermaid reached into the tangled net and pulled out something small, a shell, glowing faintly with its own light. She pressed it into Oluchi's palm. "Keep this close to you. One day it will open the door to everything you've ever wished for. But remember—" She paused, her glowing eyes darkening like a stormy wave. "Every door that opens also closes something behind you." Before Oluchi could ask what that meant, the mermaid slid into the water and disappeared without a splash, as if she had never been there at all. Oluchi stood frozen, the wet sand clinging to her toes, the glowing shell pulsing gently in her hand. That night, Oluchi lay on her thin mat, staring at the dim outlines of the goat shed roof. The village was silent except for the occasional bark of a stray dog, but in her ears the ocean roared as if she were standing right on the shore. When she closed her eyes, the darkness dissolved into an underwater world. She was walking along a path made of gold shells, schools of fish darting past her ankles. Ahead, the mermaid waited, her belly even larger now, her hands cradling it protectively. "Soon," the mermaid whispered. "Soon, you will have all you desire." Oluchi woke with a start, her heart racing. She reached into the pocket of her dress and felt the shell, warm against her skin, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. She didn't see the shadow moving outside the goat shed. It lingered for a moment, then slipped away into the night. Someone had been watching her. The morning after the dream, Oluchi woke before the cock's crow. She lay still for a moment, clutching the shell in her hand, listening to the quiet hum of crickets fading into the cool pre-dawn. She should have gone to the stream first. It was her routine, but something pulled her feet toward the shore again. The path was narrow and damp with dew. As she walked, she found herself glancing around more often than usual. The dream still lingered in her mind. The glimmer of gold shells beneath her feet, the mermaid's swollen belly, that strange promise in her voice. When she reached the shoreline, the tide was low. The same spot where she had rescued the mermaid lay empty, save for the gentle hiss of waves drawing back into the deep. She stood there for a long time, toes buried in the cool, wet sand, scanning the horizon for the shimmer of a tail. Nothing. By the time she returned home with a pot of water, Aunt Ngozi was waiting at the compound gate, arms folded. Her sharp eyes ran over Oluchi's damp dress. "So you went to the sea first again?" Her voice was like dry cassava scraping a grinding stone. I only passed by, Aunt," Oluchi stammered. Ngozi stepped closer, sniffing at her as though she could smell the salt on her skin. "They say Mami Wata will come for those who stand by the shore too long. Maybe you want to join your father under the waves, En?" Oluchi dropped her gaze, saying nothing. There was no use arguing with her aunt when suspicion had already bloomed in her mind. That night, Ngozi sat in the corner of the cooking hut, muttering with the neighbor, Mama Ude. Their voices were low, but Oluchi caught enough to know they were talking about her. "Glowing shell, she hides it? Those things bring trouble. Mark my words, she will bring the sea into this house." Oluchi gripped the shell tighter in her pocket. She didn't know why, but the thought of her aunt touching it made her chest tighten with fear. 2 days passed. Oluchi went to the shore each morning, hoping, waiting, listening. The wind would sometimes carry strange sounds, a splash that echoed longer than it should, a voice that seemed to hum in the distance. But she never saw the mermaid again. On the third day, she followed her aunt to the market to help carry baskets of dried fish. The market was loud and alive, the air thick with the smell of roasted corn, smoke from cooking fires, and the metallic tang of fresh fish. Oluchi moved through the crowd, balancing a heavy tray on her head. As she passed a group of women selling cassava, she heard them murmuring, "That's the orphan. The one who talks to the water? You know what they say. Beauty that comes too fast is not from God." She didn't know what they meant until she stopped by a stall to rest her arms. The stall owner's eyes flicked over her, her skin, which now seemed smoother than before, her hair glossier, her worn dress somehow looking cleaner. It was then Oluchi realized the shell had been warm against her skin all week, and she did feel different, lighter, sharper, stronger. Her aunt returned to find her standing still, staring into nothing. "Why are you standing like a carved statue? Move before I break that head of yours." Oluchi bit back her words and followed her, but she could feel the stares. The whispers were growing. It was on the 7th morning after the rescue that it happened. The sky was pale and thin with early light when Oluchi reached the shore. She stood there, scanning the horizon, telling herself she would wait just 5 minutes before heading to the stream. Then she saw it, a shimmer beneath the surface, like sunlight trapped in water. It moved closer, then rose. The mermaid emerged slowly, her long hair slicked back, water streaming down her shoulders. Her swollen belly seemed even heavier now. She rested her arms on a rock and looked at Oluchi with a faint smile. "You came back." Oluchi stepped forward, her feet sinking into the wet sand. I've been looking for you." The mermaid tilted her head, her eyes catching the light in a way that made them look like 2 pieces of polished glass. She reached into the water and pulled out a fish, small, silver, and still. But it shimmered unnaturally, as though lit from within. "Take it," she said, her voice low and melodic. "Sell it, eat it, give it away. It will never spoil." Oluchi hesitated, then took the fish. Its scales were warm, as though it had been sitting in the sun. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. The mermaid's smile deepened, though her eyes remained unreadable. "Because you saved me, and because soon I will ask you for something in return." A cold breeze swept over Oluchi's skin, and for the first time since rescuing her, Oluchi felt a shadow of fear. The mermaid slid back into the water, leaving a ring of ripples that slowly disappeared. Oluchi clutched the fish tightly, the sea wind tangling her hair, her mind spinning with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. She reached home with the glowing fish hidden under her wrapper. Her aunt was still asleep, snoring softly in her corner of the compound. Oluchi quickly fetched a clay bowl, poured a little water into it, and placed the fish inside. By midday, the sun blazed overhead. Her aunt finally woke and, as usual, barked orders for Oluchi to prepare firewood and fetch palm oil. But before leaving, Oluchi lifted the cover from the bowl. The fish still shimmered, no smell, no dulling of its scales. It looked as though it had just been pulled from the water. She remembered the mermaid's words, "Sell it, eat it, give it away. It will never spoil." She decided to try her luck. Wrapping the fish carefully, she walked to Mama Chibuzo's stall in the market, a woman known for buying fresh catch and selling it to the richer households. When Mama Chibuzo saw the fish, her eyes widened. "Ah, this one is fresh like morning dew. How much?" Oluchi named a price, a bold one, higher than she had ever dared. To her shock, Mama Chibuzo didn't argue. She counted the coins into Oluchi's palm. "If you find more like this, bring them to me." Oluchi walked away, her heart pounding. The coins were more than she usually saw in a month of hard labor. The next morning, she returned to the bowl. The fish was still there, exactly the same, as though time itself had stopped for it. She sold it again, and again, and again. Within a week, she had more money than she'd ever held in her life. Her once faded dress had been replaced by a clean wrapper. She bought a small bag of Gary without needing her aunt's permission. She even managed to sneak a little fried plantain from Mama Nkechi's stall, a luxury she had only tasted once in years. But money is like smoke in a small village. It rises fast and everyone sees it. It started with the looks. At the stream, women paused in their washing to glance at Oluchi's brighter wrapper. In the market, their eyes lingered on the small purse she carried at her waist. At first, it was curiosity. Then came the whispers. One afternoon, as she bent to rinse clothes by the riverbank, she heard two girls speaking behind her. Her skin is changing. Changing? Yes. See how smooth it is now? Like those women who use city creams. And where would she get money for that? She is just an orphan. Oluchi pretended not to hear, but her cheeks burned. At home, Aunt Ngozi began asking sharper questions. Where do you get money for your new wrapper? Did the women in the market take pity on you? Or did someone give it to you? Her tone was heavy with accusation. Oluchi wanted to lie, to say she had done extra chores for coins, but she knew her aunt would not believe her, so she said nothing. Silence, she had learned, was safer. But that night, she dreamed again. This time, she was sitting at the edge of an underwater palace. The mermaid swam toward her, her belly now so large it seemed to glow. "The fish will feed you for now," she said. "But soon, Oluchi, you will have more than just coins. You will have choices." Oluchi woke with her heart racing. She didn't know if the promise filled her with hope or with fear. The 9th morning after the rescue was cold and misty. Oluchi made her way to the shore as usual, the glowing shell in her pocket and a small bag of market coins tied at her waist. She stood by the water for a long time before the surface rippled. The mermaid appeared slowly, her hair spread out in the water like a fan, her eyes fixed on Oluchi. "You've used the fish well," the mermaid said, "but remember, nothing in this world is given without a price." Oluchi's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" The mermaid tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "When the time comes, I will ask, and you must give. If you refuse, the sea will take what it wants anyway." A shiver ran down Oluchi's spine. Before she could speak again, the mermaid reached out, touching Oluchi's hand briefly. The touch was cold, painfully cold, and when she pulled back, a tiny pearl sat in Oluchi's palm. "For now," the mermaid said, "this will open doors. But doors open both ways, child." She slid back into the water, leaving only the faint scent of salt and a growing heaviness in Oluchi's chest. That evening at the market, she sold the pearl to a wealthy trader for a sum so large she could hardly breathe. But when she got home, she found her aunt staring at her from the doorway, eyes narrow, lips pressed into a thin line. "Where," Aunt Ngozi asked slowly, "is all this money coming from?" Oluchi's fingers tightened around the purse at her waist. She opened her mouth, but no answer came. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the huts, the ocean roared louder than usual, as if it too was waiting for her reply. Oluchi's life began to change in ways the village could not ignore. The magical fish still shimmered each morning in its clay bowl, and each day she sold it, the money multiplied. The pearl the mermaid had given her had bought new wrappers, better food, and even a pair of delicate gold earrings. But while her body enjoyed the comfort of plenty, her mind was never fully at rest. Sometimes, as she counted coins at night, the mermaid's voice would echo in her head. "When the time comes, I will ask." and you must give." It was during this time that she met Chica. He was not from the village, a tall, broad-shouldered trader from the city who came every few weeks to buy dried fish in bulk. His clothes were neat, his voice calm, and he carried himself like a man who knew where he was going. Chica noticed Oluchi in the market one hot afternoon, her laughter carrying over the crowd as she bargained with a fishmonger. Later, he asked about her and was told she was an orphan living with her aunt. From that day, Chica began to visit the market more often. He would linger at her stall, buying more than he needed, asking about her day. Slowly, the visits turned to walks by the shore, where they spoke about their dreams and the kind of home they wanted. When Chica finally asked for her hand in marriage, Oluchi's heart leapt, but she knew her aunt would not approve. She was right. Aunt Ngozi called Chica a smooth-tongued stranger, accusing him of hiding bad intentions. She spread whispers in the village that Oluchi had been feeding him charms to make him love her. She even approached Chica privately, warning him that Oluchi was tied to spirits from the water. But Chica was not swayed. His family came, met with Oluchi, and found nothing but kindness and grace in her. Despite Ngozi's protests, the wedding was fixed. On the morning of the ceremony, Oluchi stood in a soft cream wrapper embroidered with gold, her hair wrapped in a delicate veil. The drums played loud enough to drown the sound of her aunt's muttered curses. By evening, Oluchi had left her aunt's compound for the last time, the weight of years of hardship finally lifting from her shoulders. Married life brought Oluchi into a world she had only imagined. Chica's home was a large compound in the city, with painted walls, wide verandas, and servants who treated her with respect. Her days were filled with laughter, visits to the market in fine clothes, and the warmth of a husband who adored her. The blessings did not stop there. Chica's trading business flourished more than ever. Every journey he made brought in more profit than the last. His boats returned with goods untouched by storms, while other traders lost cargo to sudden tempests. Oluchi knew deep down why their fortune was so steady. She had not seen the mermaid since her wedding day, but sometimes in the stillness of dawn, she would hear the faint sound of humming coming from the direction of the sea. And always, the mermaid's words returned to her. "When the time comes, I will ask, and you must give." One night, as Chica slept beside her, Oluchi lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her hand rested on her stomach, which was beginning to swell with the life of their first child. Joy should have filled her, but so did dread. The blessings in her life now felt like threads in a net, tightening slowly, waiting for the pull. The day was bright and calm when Oluchi returned to the shore for the first time in months. She was 8 months pregnant, her belly heavy under a flowing wrapper. The journey from the city to the coast had been long, but something inside her told her it was time. She reached the edge of the water and waited. It wasn't long before the sea rippled and the mermaid rose, her beauty unchanged, but her expression more intense than Oluchi had ever seen. "You've come," the mermaid said, her voice carrying easily over the waves. Oluchi nodded, resting a hand on her belly. "I needed to see you." The mermaid's gaze dropped to the swell of her stomach, and something like longing flickered in her eyes. She swam closer until the water lapped around Oluchi's ankles. "It's almost time," she said softly. "The child will be mine." Oluchi's heart pounded. "I don't understand. This is my baby, mine and Cheeks. You can't take it." The mermaid's expression hardened. "Do you think blessings grow from the ground like weeds? Every mouthful you've eaten, every coin in your hand, every door that opened for you, all of it came from me. I asked for nothing. Until now. I never agreed to this." Oluchi's voice rose, breaking with fear and anger. "Besides, I saved you first." The water around the mermaid began to churn, the waves slapping harder against Oluchi's legs. The sky dimmed slightly as clouds gathered over the horizon. "You owe me, Oluchi," the mermaid said, her voice now sharp as a knife. "Your child will live where mine could not. It will be cherished, safe from the curse that stole my own. But if you refuse, I will take more than the child. I will take the joy from your home, the life from your husband, and the peace from your days." Oluchi's hand trembled on her belly. "I will never give you my child," she whispered. The mermaid's eyes darkened like a storm. "We shall see." A wave surged suddenly, drenching Oluchi from the waist down. By the time she wiped the water from her eyes, the mermaid was gone, leaving only the sound of the ocean's roar and the pounding of Oluchi's own heart. For days after that stormy meeting, Oluchi could not sleep. The sound of waves haunted her dreams, and each time she woke, she instinctively placed her hands on her belly as though to shield the life within. Chika noticed her restlessness. "Is it the baby?" he asked one evening, his warm palm resting gently over her stomach. Oluchi forced a smile. "It's nothing. I'm fine." But inside, she was far from fine. On the fifth night, she could no longer bear the weight of silence. She rose quietly from bed, wrapped herself in a thick shawl, and made her way to the shore under the cover of moonlight. The sea was calm, the air heavy with salt. She stood at the edge of the water, her voice low but firm. "Come out. We need to speak." The surface rippled, and there she was, the mermaid, her eyes glinting silver in the moonlight. Oluchi stepped forward, the cold water lapping at her feet. "Do you remember the morning I found you, tangled in the fisherman's deadly net? No one else was there. I could have walked away, but I saved you." The mermaid's gaze flickered, a shadow of the past crossing her face. "I didn't help you because I wanted something in return," Oluchi continued. "I helped you because you were in pain. And now I'm the one in pain, knowing you want to take my child." The mermaid's voice was softer this time, but still resolute. "And I gave you more than you ever dreamed. You live in wealth, in love, in safety, all because of me. You owe me." Oluchi's breath caught, but she didn't back away. "Then let me find another way. Let me give you something that will heal your curse without taking my baby." The mermaid tilted her head, studying her. "There is no other way, unless you can find a power greater than the ocean." Oluchi's pulse quickened. "Then I will find it." The mermaid's lips curved faintly. "You have until the next full moon." And with a flick of her shimmering tail, she was gone, leaving Oluchi with the sound of her own vow ringing in her ears. The days that followed were filled with urgency. Oluchi visited elders in nearby villages, speaking in hushed tones about ancient powers, blessings, and curses. Most shook their heads. Some warned her to leave the matter alone, that the sea always takes what it wants. But Oluchi refused to give up. She traveled further inland, seeking the wisdom of a priestess known as Mama Ifeoma, a woman whose prayers were said to calm storms and heal fevers the healers could not cure. Mama Ifeoma lived in a small, whitewashed hut surrounded by tall palm trees. Her eyes were sharp, yet kind, as she listened to Oluchi pour out her story, the rescue, the gifts, the marriage, and now, the threat. When Oluchi finished, the priestess was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on the swell of Oluchi's belly. "You are bound to her by a covenant of life and debt," Mama Ifeoma said finally. "But covenants can be rewritten if both hearts agree." Oluchi leaned forward. "You mean there is a way?" The priestess nodded. "But it will not be by force. You must make her want to bless your child instead of taking it. And for that, she must feel what she has never felt before, the joy of holding a living child in her arms." Oluchi's brow furrowed. "But she loses her babies the day they're born." That is where the greater power comes in, Mama Ifeoma said. On the day your child is born, you must invite her to the shore, not to take, but to witness life. If the Creator blesses the moment, her curse will break. Oluchi's heart thudded with both hope and fear. The plan was risky. If it failed, the mermaid might take the child anyway. But she had no choice. The moon was nearly full when Oluchi returned to the shore again, her belly now heavy, every step slower than the last. The tide was high, the waves whispering over the sand. She called for the mermaid, and within moments, the familiar shimmer broke the surface. The mermaid swam closer, her expression unreadable. "Your time is almost here," she said quietly. Oluchi took a deep breath. "I have found a way for us both to be happy." The mermaid's brow arched. "There is no way, Oluchi." "Yes, there is," Oluchi pressed on. "I've spoken to a woman who knows the kind of power even the sea respects. When my baby is born, I want you there. Not to take it, but to see it live. If you touch it while it breathes, if you hold it in your arms, the curse can break." The mermaid's gaze softened, just for a moment, and something deep flickered in her eyes. Longing, perhaps, or hope too fragile to name. "And if you are wrong?" the mermaid asked. Oluchi's hand rested protectively over her stomach. "Then you can take what you came for. But I will not stop fighting until I've tried." For the first time, the mermaid was silent, the waves rocking gently between them. Then she nodded once. "The night your child is born, call me." As she slipped back into the water, Oluchi stood there, her shawl clinging to her in the sea breeze, feeling both the weight of risk and the light of hope. She didn't know if this would end in joy or heartbreak, but for the first time since the mermaid's claim, she felt she might have a chance. The evening before her labor began, the air in the city felt strangely heavy. Dark clouds gathered over the horizon, even though the wind was warm. The streets bustled with traders hurrying home before the rain, but inside Chike's large compound, the atmosphere was tense. Oluchi sat on the veranda, rubbing her swollen belly. The baby kicked softly, a rhythm she had grown to recognize over the past months. She smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. Her conversation with the mermaid replayed in her thoughts. "The night your child is born, call me." She wondered if she had made a mistake. What if the curse did not break? What if the mermaid took her child and vanished into the deep, leaving her with nothing but regret? Chike came out with a bowl of pepper soup, placing it in front of her. "You need to eat," he said gently. Oluchi forced a smile and took a sip. She loved this man. The thought of losing their baby to a deal she had made in desperation twisted her stomach more than the contractions that had begun to flicker faintly. That night, the first real pains started. At first they were far apart, like distant drumbeats, but soon they came faster, sharper. The midwife, Madame Uju, was called into the compound. "It will be a long night," Madame Uju said, arranging clean cloths and bowls of hot water. As the hours passed, Oluchi's body fought and strained, her hands gripping the edge of the bed. Outside, the wind grew wilder, rattling the shutters. The storm that had been waiting all day finally broke, rain lashing against the roof. And somewhere, beneath the howl of the wind, Oluchi thought she heard it. The faint, familiar hum of a voice that was not human. The contractions came hard now, each one leaving Oluchi breathless. Madame Uju worked quickly, pressing warm cloths against her back, speaking in low, steady tones. But amid the chaos, Oluchi's mind was fixed on one thing. She had to reach the shore. The agreement had been clear. The mermaid must be present when the child entered the world. When the pain eased for a brief moment, Oluchi turned to Chike. "Help me to the water," she whispered. Chike's eyes widened. "Oluchi, you can't—" "Please," she gasped. "It's the only way." Reluctantly and without understanding why, Chike lifted her into his arms and carried her through the rain. Madame Uju followed, holding a lantern against the wind. The path to the shore was slick with mud, the storm whipping their clothes. The sea roared louder than Oluchi had ever heard it, waves smashing against the rocks. And then, through the sheets of rain, the water broke in a different way, a ripple, deep and deliberate. The mermaid rose, her shimmering form lit by the lightning that cracked overhead. Her eyes went straight to Oluchi. "You have called me." Oluchi's breath came in shallow bursts. "Yes, but not to take, to see." The mermaid's gaze dropped to the swell of her belly, and for a moment her face softened. Madame Uju glanced between them, confused, but too focused on her work to ask questions. "The child is coming now," she said urgently. The mermaid moved closer, the waves lapping at Chica's ankles. "Then let me be here." The wind howled, the sea churned, and under the flicker of lantern light and the flash of lightning, Oluchi's cries mixed with the roar of the ocean. Madame Uju knelt beside her, guiding her through the final moments. "Push, my daughter! Push!" With one last cry, the baby came into the world, a tiny, wailing bundle, alive and fierce against the storm. Oluchi reached for her child, tears streaming down her face. The mermaid watched from the shallows, her expression unreadable, the rain sliding down her glowing skin. Oluchi held the baby close, then, trembling, extended her arms toward the water. "Come, hold him." Chika's head snapped toward her in shock, but she met his eyes with a silent plea. "Trust me." The mermaid swam closer, her movements slow, reverent. She reached out and took the baby into her arms. For a heartbeat, the storm seemed to pause. The baby's cries softened. The mermaid looked down at the tiny face, her eyes wide. And then something extraordinary happened. A warm golden light began to glow from the baby's chest, spreading into the mermaid's hands. The waves around her stilled. The air seemed to hum. She looked up at Oluchi, her voice breaking. He lives, and my curse, it is gone." Tears mingled with the rain on her face. She pressed a gentle kiss to the baby's forehead before placing him back in Oluchi's arms. "You have given me a gift greater than any I could take," she said. "From this day, the sea will watch over you and your child." With one last look, the mermaid slipped back into the deep, the golden glow fading into the calm waves. Oluchi clutched her son, feeling the weight of fear lift from her chest. Chika wrapped them both in his arms, the storm easing above them. That night, as they walked back to the compound, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle. And though the sea was far behind them, Oluchi could almost swear she heard a soft, contented humming following them home. The days that followed the storm felt like a different lifetime. Oluchi's home was filled with the sound of her baby's laughter and the soft patter of tiny feet learning to walk on the cool, tiled floor. Chike beamed with pride, telling anyone who would listen that his wife was the strongest woman he knew. But what Oluchi held closest to her heart was the peace that now surrounded her. The mermaid had kept her word. Chika's trading ships returned with more goods than ever before, never touched by storms. The fishing boats in their village came back full, and the villagers whispered that the sea had smiled on them again. Once, on a quiet afternoon, Oluchi returned to the shore with her son in her arms. The water was calm, the sky a deep, endless blue. From beneath the waves, a familiar shimmer appeared. The mermaid, her face lit with a smile that was both human and otherworldly. She didn't come too close, only raised her hand in greeting. Oluchi returned the gesture, her son giggling at the sight of the sparkling tail. They needed no words. The bond between them had been rewritten, no longer a covenant of debt, but a friendship carved from sacrifice and trust. As the years passed, Oluchi's son grew strong and curious. He loved the shore, always running to the water's edge with laughter in his eyes. Sometimes when Oluchi wasn't looking, she'd see a flash beneath the waves, the mermaid keeping watch from a distance. The villagers, once quick to whisper, now greeted Oluchi with respect. They had seen her rise from poverty to a life of abundance, not through greed, but through courage and grace. Even Aunt Nena, who had once tried to ruin her, came one afternoon with tears in her eyes to beg forgiveness. Oluchi, remembering her own mother's teachings, embraced her without bitterness. And in the quiet moments, when the sea breeze brushed against her face and the sound of waves drifted to her ears, Oluchi would remember the day she first heard that desperate cry at dawn. She had not known then how deeply it would change her life, how a single act of kindness could ripple through time like the tide, touching both land and sea forever. Moral of the story: no gift in life is without responsibility, but true power lies in how we honor the debts of the heart. Compassion given without expectation can return to you in ways you could never imagine. And sometimes, the greatest battles are not won by strength or force, but by love, trust, and the courage to find a path where no one has to lose. And that, my friends, is how the poor orphan girl, Oluchi, became the keeper of two worlds, loved by the land, blessed by the sea. It is a story of courage, of promises, and of how a single act of kindness can change the tides of fate forever. If this story touched your heart, don't just leave silently. Tell me in the comments, if you were Oluchi, would you have made the same choice? Or would you have walked away from the sea that day? And remember, more powerful folk tales like this are waiting for you here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story that might just change the way you see the world. See you in our next story. Bye, guys.